what happened, as far as I remember, there's this Cambridge Jugglers Association, and there were a load of us there. Most of us were students. There were a few people from Cambridge town who came and had a great fun. And simultaneously, we were all sort of thinking about the patterns and what we could do, etc. And I guess we were thinking about patterns like 4-2 and 5-3 and simple things like that. And it looked like 3-1 fitted into the same sort of pattern, but we didn't know what we were talking about at that stage. Or 5-1, because we didn't know what 1 meant. So we were sort of talking about this in the evening. This was Colin Wright, Mike Day, and me. We went home, and basically we sort of thought, so me personally, I was thinking about 5-1 and thinking, well, it's got to average 3, so heck, it's got to be a 1. What can that mean? What can the 1 therefore be? Okay, it's got to be that quick transfer. That means the 2 must mean something. Quick messing around with a few patterns, you realise it must be holding a ball. What on earth does 0 mean? Okay, think about 6-0 or 4-0 or something. Right, it's got to be an empty hand. What does that mean? So basically what happened is the next day we met each other. We're like, hey, I've got to tell you something. No, me first. I've got to tell you something. No, really, I've got to, something exciting. So, and we're all saying, you can make meanings to 1, 2, and 0, and it always averages out right. And that's the first thing we knew, that it all averaged out right. And then I think Colin and I probably went away, possibly Mike as well, I don't know, and realised that what it was is this mathematical thing where the balls can't come down at the same time. And no 2 things coming down at the same time, mathematicians call a bijection, because they like to use long words for simple things. And now we sort of had a handle on these things and we could start counting them. And I remember the first evening I came back with a sort of complete description. I could like write down all the period 3-ball juggles or something. So I did. And I'm like, what the hell's that? 5-3-1. I've never seen that in my life. And I think Mike Day came back and said, what the hell's that? 5-0-4. I've never seen that in my life. So next juggling meeting, we come to each other and I'm juggling 5-3-1 at him and saying, yay, new juggling. And he's juggling 5-0-4 at me. And this fantastic sort of, and so we invented those two. And it was just a great time of discovery. But I think one of the limitations at first when we were coming up with it is that between us we could only juggle 3-5, 5-3, we could juggle 4-2 but we didn't know what it was called. We could probably juggle 6-2 but we didn't know what it was called. And so the actual number of things which we could experiment with was pretty damn limited. But I'm certain that 5-3-4 was in there at the beginning, because 5-3-4 is the first time when you think, okay, I'm doing something exciting where the balls are flying around and I need a notation for it. What am I going to call it? Well, I've got big, small. I've got a half shower shoved between some ordinary 4 throws. So maybe I can call it half shower 4 or something. And it's sort of, you mess around with it until it works. There's somehow a film on paper of the way that the thing is going to look eventually, which is really lovely to see. And I pretty much fall back to them whenever I'm doing passing patterns as well, because they're really the only way of understanding passing patterns. But the discovery process for me was through the numbers, not through the diagrams. I didn't get my squared paper out until later when I was trying to sort of do more complicated stuff. It was the average of the numbers always being the number of balls, which really drove me to knowing what 1 and 2 and 0 must mean. Not the pattern, not the diagram. I guess I believe that maths, the truth of maths, the things in maths which are true, has always existed, I believe, for what it's worth. Did the juggle exist before anybody had actually juggled it? I guess I'm going to say no, because you're definitely creating something. I mean, did the Humber Bridge exist before anybody had built it? No, but the engineering did, the maths did, but somebody's actually got to go and do it. And so I think the juggle doesn't exist until somebody's actually gone and done it. So I think you're genuinely creating something there. And certainly, I mean, 531, some caveman might just have managed it with a couple of rocks for a small time, or 3 rocks for a small time, but something like 672, no, the first time somebody did 672, they knew they were doing 672, they weren't messing around. Well, the two that I have to say stick in my mind are 531 and 504, because they're the two that the three of us basically discovered the same evening, not in the same rooms, but when we got back together, you know, we were talking, hey, I've got this one, hey, I've got that one. And that was definitely a voyage of discovery, when you realise that this notation you've thought was an abstract piece of math suddenly comes up with something that you can actually juggle. So for historical reasons, I've got to sort of love 531 and 504. If you were going to give me the ability to do one juggle and just keep, you know, only that one juggle, I'm no brilliant juggler, but the one that I've probably put most effort into and still can't flipping do is 645. So I would just love to be able to do that, I guess, if you were to give me that ability. In trying to find out what's possible and what isn't, you want to make sure that no two balls land at the same time, and you want to make sure that you're not throwing any two balls at the same time, unless, of course, you're doing multiplex throws and multiplex catches. But your basic stuff, you want to make sure that two things are happening at the same time, and no two things are coming from the same place. In maths, if you have a function from somewhere to somewhere else, then one thing only goes to one place, so that's no two things thrown at the same time, and no two things come to the same place. That's got a word. That word is injective, and that's a good word, and it's the same as bijective in this particular case. And so you sort of write down that word as a mathematician, and now you know what you're trying to enumerate. So by hand at first, you can enumerate sort of what's possible and cross out the ones that aren't and just get to it. I didn't do the counting theorem. Colin got there first, and Colin had, what I have to say, and what he would probably agree with me, is a hideous and inelegant counting of the number of patterns with, let's get this right, period p, or something that divides p, and at most b balls. And that turns out to be b plus 1 to the power of p. And he had this, you know, 2-page long argument, which is sort of, it was understandable to somebody who's used to reading, you know, technical maths journals for people who've got a PhD in the subject, but not very useful for your average circus performer. Something like that ought to be, there are p things, each of which can take b plus 1 different values, and you just put them together how you like. But juggles aren't like that. You can't do 5, 4, 3. You can only do 5, 3, 4. There are restrictions on it. So juggles aren't like that. So what is? I think I'd like to give an example, which is one I was actually asked in a juggling convention by Mike Day. And he essentially asked me, how do I transition to 6, 7, 2? So my first reaction is, how do you transition to 6, 7, 2? How do you juggle 6, 7, 2? But Mike could happily juggle 6, 7, 2. So he wants a transition that goes from 5, 5, 5 to 6, 7, 2. So putting that aside, I want to explain the juggling generators, as I call them, which give rise to the juggling patterns. And you can just put them together willy-nilly, and that's their power. And I'll do it with 5, 5, 2, and you'll see what I mean. This is the juggling generator, and the actual juggling pattern that it's going to correspond to is going to be 6, 7, 2. And these things can be put together in any order you like and anyhow, and these things are just juggling patterns like you know and love. And here's how they work. Your generator 5, 5, 2, you take, how far does it go up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there we are. Take 6 cards, and you take the bottom one and move it to the top for 5. and then you again take the bottom one and move it for the top for 5. So you're moving something up 5 places, and then for 2 you move something up only 2 places and the others stay where they are. And you continue to do that 5, 5, 2. I better do it once more. 5, 5, 2. And the end result, when you're finished, is that you can count how long these things take to come down, and you've essentially drawn yourself a little diagram. So this goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 goes before it comes down, and this takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 goes before it comes down, and this takes 1, 2, 3 goes before it comes down, and so forth. And on it goes. And then rather awkwardly I have to subtract 1 from each of these numbers, which is a shame, but that seems to be how the world wants to work. But the great thing about these things is that if you want to transition from here to here, it's quite hard. But if you want to transition from the juggling generator, I should also say for 555 is 555. If you want to transition from there to there, all you do is you're sitting there doing 555 for a bit, and then you just start doing 552 for a bit. And if you'd write all of the numbers, if you do this process with a bunch of 5s, and then you suddenly start going 552, 552, 552, do this counting process and come down, you end up with what you know and love as the right transition, which is going to be 672, 672, 672. This is the generator. This is the pattern, and it's going to do this, I assure you. So this example is dear to my heart because Mike Day was sitting in a cafe with me at a, I think, Birmingham juggling convention, and said, how do I transition from 555 to 672? And I could actually answer the question. I could like write it down and say, oh yes, well there's only going to be one transition and it's going to look like this. What you do is, you can do 555, you can do 672, you put a single 6 in between the two. And it's great. And if you can really juggle these well, you might be able to imagine putting the 6 in. But it's great that you can generate this thing automatically and you can just throw these things around and they work. And now, the number of generators like this, the numbers in here are all 0 to 5. The length of the pattern is 3. And now there really is obviously 6 to the 3 different versions of this. And that's what the formula gives. It's at most B balls, because the biggest number in here tells you the number of balls. And it's a period P, except obviously I've got some of period 1 in there because 1 divides 3, but that's what this formula does as well. And now we have a method of going from generators to patterns, and it's clear that there are the right number of generators.
And is there a simple definition for a generator? I think that's what I'm not quite...
What makes a generator and what makes not a generator?
Yeah.
Everything's a generator. Any sequence of numbers is a generator. That's the great thing about them.
Mm-hmm.
This tells you how to go from the generator to the pattern, but any sequence of numbers is a generator.
So in terms of enumeration, and you're probably going to explain that in a minute, because then that's what's confusing me, is if any sequence of numbers, digits, is a generator, then it's very easy to count those generators, but surely there's not a one-to-one equivalence. Is it a one-to-one equivalence between generators and patterns?
Yep. It's as simple as that. And that's why there are... So the number of balls is the biggest number in here. So this is a 5-ball pattern because the biggest number is 5. It's period 3 because it's obviously period 3. And you just correspondence, yep.
And so then your clarification of the formula
is each of these numbers has to take a value from 0 to 5 because you've got at most 5 balls. There are 3 of those numbers. 0 to 5 is 6 different values, so it's 6 to the power 3. And I've seen somebody who writes these as cards. So you've got a card with this written on, and then you've got a card with that written on, and then there's another card with this written on, and you're trying to see how many how many ways you can put the cards down on the table, and as you put them down, the lines sort of join up in this way, and you watch these diagrams evolve as you put the cards down.